You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
This is Talking Headways, a weekly podcast about sustainable transportation and urban design. I'm Jeff Wood. This week we're on vacation, but we're flashing back to episode 391 and chatting with Jonathon Stalls about his wonderful book, Walk, Slow Down, Wake Up, and Connect at 1 to 3 miles per hour. Stay with us.
Today's podcast is brought to you by our super wonderful, terrific, amazing Patreon supporters. We appreciate you all keeping this show and Mondays at the Overhead Wire going. To join this merry band of city wizards and transportation experts, go to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. $2 a month gets you some stickers and a handwritten note sent with a cool train station stamp. $10 a month gets you one of our transportation scarves. We've also got some bonus material up there, so check it out if you haven't already. And speaking of scarves, the heavyweight net bike scarf is back in stock. I'm also going to make a concerted effort to make some new designs, but if you want to get one of the Buster Bike scarves or the Lightweight Bike scarf now, visit theoverheadwire.com or support us on Patreon. And if you'd like to support the show in other ways, you can buy books at the bookshop site, bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire, or find our Cars Are Cholesterol merch at bit.ly/carsarecholesterol. For anything else, including the Town Planning and Practice audiobook, visit theoverheadwire.com and definitely sign up for the almost 20-year-old daily newsletter. Or you can just keep listening and enjoying the show. We appreciate that too. You can also find us on Blue Sky, Mastodon, Threads, Instagram, Flickr, YouTube, Substack, and LinkedIn if you want to connect, usually at the Overhead Wire, but with Flickr, it's Transit Nerds. Some great stuff coming up, so keep on listening and enjoy the show. A quick note for Patreon supporters. I've set up an ad-free podcast RSS feed at Patreon. This means if you want to listen to the show without ads or promotional episodes in your podcatcher of choice, you can do so by heading over to your Patreon account and getting the feed there. I'll post instructions in the show notes of how to do it. And if you aren't a Patreon supporter, you can do so by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. Even just $1 a month gets you our podcast free of outside ads. That's patreon.com/theoverheadwire.
Hope everyone's doing well. I'm in China this month, and we'll be back with new episodes next week, but this week I'm hanging out in Beijing and didn't have time to produce a new episode. But check out my Instagram at The Overhead Wire for pictures, mostly for fun, but also including some transportation shots. In the meantime, let's flash back to 2022 and our discussion with the amazing Jonathon Stalls of Pedestrian Dignity.
Well, Jonathon Stalls, welcome to the Talking Headways podcast.
Thank you. I'm eager to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I consider myself a walking artist. So there's a lot of layers to that, a lot of branches out of the tree, as I call it. I spend easily 8 to 15 miles a day on foot, depending. So there's a mix of things happening. I take obviously all my meetings by foot. I'm a pedestrian commuter, so I get around. I'm in Denver, Colorado mostly, but hop around to a lot of places. And so by foot, by bus, transit, all the things. And with that comes, I have sketchbooks in my backpack, and I do a lot of pen and ink drawing. I do poetry and writing and host walking events, walking rolling events connected to transit with different groups of people, and then do a lot of storytelling and documenting on pedestrian dignity, content themes. So, and there's 100 other things, but that's a nutshell of just my work. I have a husband. I'm LGBTQIA. I have this amazing husky dog that is still with me 14 years, who walked across the US with me. And so, yeah, that's a nutshell.
I want to get to the pups in a bit.
Yeah,
you have a lot of references to dogs, which I love in the book and throughout your work. But I kind of want to ask, one of the things I ask a lot of the guests is like, how did they get into what they're into now? So what was the impetus, or what was the first kind of inclination that walking was powerful to you? Was it when you were a kid? Was it when you were older and started kind of realizing some things about yourself? What was the first experience where a walk was like, okay, this is me and this is what I want to do?
Yeah. So it really started for me. I mean, I was always drawn to be outside. I always felt more at home outside, but I never really had a lot of outdoor hiking, backpacking, camping experiences as a kid. Sports inside of gyms, mostly when I think about recreation, but I spent a lot of time like in creeks and just playing with mud and all kinds of things and trees. And we had a little creek in the house I lived at for many years as a young kid. So I think outside was always drawing me out, but specific to walking, it was never really a thing until in 2010, I did a walk across the US This was a 242-day, 8.5 month journey. And really it was very much a personal healing journey. That's how I would describe it now. I don't know that I would have put those words to it then, but I needed to get out and recalibrate, rearrange, I needed to hit restart on a lot of things. And so there was a lot stacking up to that. We could spend hours talking about it, but I think just moving into the unknown on day one, not having a clue what I was doing, so open, so eager to learn and to kind of be reshaped by my environment as a pedestrian, as someone walking for days and days and days, and already being an artist, so eager to feel things and create from things. And so that combination was a storm of learning and passion and really hard things, so that walk was really what kicked it off. It really, really embedded my relationship to moving the way I was made to, 1 to 3 miles an hour.
That walk must come back into your memory, I imagine. Is there a number of times a day that you feel like it comes back, or there's things that you connect to from that walk? I mean, it's obviously a long journey. It also takes up a lot of time. I'm curious if there's like a daily kind of touchstone that comes back from that long walk across the United States.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that I connect to a lot actually with it, and I started this walk, I was terrified of a lot of things. I was really struggling with some internal things. This was part of my coming out journey. This was part of I was working through a lot of hard stuff, and I didn't feel strong on the inside, just to simply put it. There's terms like rite of passage, but I always kind of had this frame of, I have what it takes, or I don't have what it takes, or I'm afraid. I don't know, where am I going to sleep? Who am I going to meet? What's going to happen throughout this whole day moving through the desert? Am I going to find water? Things like that. So I would say what's interesting is I source that walk a lot when I'm facing, in a day, just something that like, okay, I'm a little unsure of this. I'm not feeling great about this, or I'm nervous about it, or anxiety starts to pick up. I source that walk all the time, thinking about, I have what it takes. I've walked across the desert. Jonathan, you've slept under how many highways? You can do this. You got this. You got this. So I source it a lot in those spaces. I think because I'm out walking every day, like it's still with me every day in a way that it's so integrated. I mean, it was a recalibration around how I wanted to move through the world and move with people and move with myself. And so this walking artist frame literally started in 2010, and it hasn't stopped.
Well, it seemed like a great journey and a struggle as well. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened on your journey. But, one of the things that stuck out to me were the trail angels, the people that came along and met you along the way and, gave you lots of things to think about. The story that, pops out at me was the one where the grandmother of a young man who took his own life, she gave you some rocks to pass along as you went to beautiful places. And she didn't know you and you didn't know her. And she just kind of stopped on the side of the road and picked you up and brought you to dinner on Easter Sunday. And it's like, those types of interactions are amazing and crazy and wonderful and a little bit scary even maybe at the start. But it's just something about those people that came out to see you when you're on this journey that makes a huge difference in how you see people generally, I imagine.
Yes, it is one of the loudest lessons vibrations from that whole experience, and still ongoing. The trail angels, as we call them, if you do long distance walking of any kind, but just even in everyday settings. I mean, just the people that you kind of stumble upon, there's so much. I always kind of frame it in this unhurried pace. I mean, it's connected to even like, if you're in a hurry as a pedestrian trying to get somewhere, you can still stumble upon so many things that you wouldn't necessarily in a car. But there's so much like that family. And, I stayed with 120 strangers on that cross-country walk. And so thinking about 120 different stories, backgrounds, religions, races, sexual orientations, belief systems, categories, at the end of the day, like we're sharing these really simple moments and having these common ground connection experiences simply because I'm moving through in a more unhurried way is how I like to frame it. But yeah, profound and so human too.
Yeah, and human's a good way to describe it, but also natural. I think your interactions with dogs and with birds and trees and all that stuff. I mean, that's You mentioned in the book laying under trees and feeling them and understanding them and tree bathing and all those things that, I've read about and I understand and I kind of felt them myself, but there's something different about interacting with humans and then interacting with nature and humans in nature.
Yeah, there's so much there. Yes, it's just it's one of the things where, I have this drawing that I really love. It's in the book, and it's this drawing, I call it kind of going into relationship with, and I kind of it breaks out into different areas like rivers and streams, skies and storms and sunsets and trees and the natural world and critters and birds and people and humans and other beings. But just this, we all, I think, carry all these complex things inside of us. And, I think about human evolution. I think about many people groups still to this day that move through spaces and land in a more migratory sort of way, but just to actually being in relationship with the things that are outside of our screens and our walls, in a sense. We can still, obviously, dogs and cats and pets and plants, but these things that are just kind of bursting with life and kind of having those with me in an intentional way. My gosh, it helps carry hard and stressful things, these things that I believe see us as we move through the world in an unhurried way, that the trees are helping us breathe and they see us. The sky is kind of reminding us to be open, to dream, to see and be in the spaces between. The water reminds us of flow and rushing and resting spaces. So I just find so much nourishment in moving through the world. And even in a city where there's kind of more of a buzz of family and elders and mixed, hurried, trips, kind of all co-creating this story. I just love it.
Well, it kind of creates a safety. And I think that was another theme that permeated the book, but also not being safe. Almost get run over by a truck.
Right.
The experiences that you have on your TikTok channel, those types of things. I'm wondering how safe you feel on walks generally. In nature, it's easy to be safe because you're among the trees and everything else. But on roads, when you're interacting with vehicles and 2-ton, giants, how often do you feel safe?
It's a great question. And, the safety piece is so huge. And I'm always thinking about being a white man in the world and being of any other race or gender or orientation or someone with a disability of various kinds, like moving through. Safety is just this. It's a huge, important, complicated, rough edge. And I think especially thinking about built environment and car-centric built environment, in terms of how that edge just continues to be rough, continues to be really disconnected from humble human frames moving through space and time. And so, I had never done any urban planning study, public health study, engineering study prior to this walk. I had a mixed experience growing up, both in cars and on transit, but I just hadn't had a heavy lens on pedestrian mobility. And this was I don't know how many degrees on lived experience education related to, and this connects to the campaign that I work on a lot, Pedestrian Dignity, the dignity of a human body moving from A to B. The safety elements were often daily, hard, complicated, outrageous in so many ways. Literally outrageous, Jeff. It was like just going into one town, city, suburb after the other, just hit cut and paste on how outrageous the environments are against a pedestrian, unless you're hanging out just on a main street. But even those main streets can be really rough. If you're hanging out in an urban core, you get a little closer, but even those urban cores can be so disconnected, thinking about public restrooms and access to water and seating and full accessibility for all mobility users. It was just, I'm somebody that carries energy in my body. As you can tell, I get loud and I grunt. And so I just was like, all the time on this walk. Very much the beauty, as we talked about, the trees and the sky and the people and the flow, but then obviously the slam contrast of literally being bypassed, unseen, sprayed, almost ran over, an uncountable number of times.
That kind of leads to pedestrian dignity. Can you tell me more about that and where that came from and how you're processing that now?
Yeah, gosh. So when I did this long walk, a lot of my journey started there. And so after that long walk, what I really cared about, which was at the front of the line, was just how can I be a part of weaving more people moving the way we're made to move, for connection to land, to others, to self. I wanted to get into creative exploration. I started this organization group project called Walk to Connect. That was kind of going into 2011, 2012. And one of the branches of Walk to Connect was, from the very beginning, was to invite different decision makers, planners, people who are kind of leaning into a professional path related to transportation, into kind of lived, embodied pedestrian mobility around the very plans, the districts they help represent, and obviously doing that with residents and different people, and just experimenting a lot with that for years. And as I got on a lot of the committees for pedestrian, just pedestrian planning, and just joined a lot of the meetings and info sessions and community engagement sessions, I found myself over and over and over and over and over just trying to articulate or explain, or I was getting really the activist, the grunting person who's not, it's just not okay, was getting louder and louder inside me. And so as an artist, I'm like, okay, I have to come up, I have to channel this, or I'm going to just yell in meetings and I don't find that all that helpful sometimes. Sometimes it needs to happen, but it's just, how can I, as an artist, channel, honestly, some of the rage that I feel, the absolutely outrageous reality that a pedestrian can't safely navigate practical spaces in a safe and comfortable, and for our planet, for all the reasons. And so the rage I feel, but also like the beauty and the opportunity and the benefits, like the positive invitations related to moving the way we're made to. I wanted to create around those things. So the last 3-4 years, as I kind of moved not fully away from Walk to Connect, but kind of rearranged my relationship to that project, I wanted to free up artistic expression. So I started under the container of this Intrinsic Paths is kind of my artwork framework, and Pedestrian Dignity is a project of that art expression that I'm constantly moving with. And I told myself from the beginning with Pedestrian Dignity, this is going to be unapologetic. This is going to be just obnoxious if it needs to be. This is going to be loud and angry if it needs to be. This is going to be celebratory and liberative if it needs to be. This is going to be dancing in the streets. This is going to be cussing at sidewalks. This is going to be like, just feel what it's like, but very much having this campaign center the lived experience. I know because I walk it. I know because I move on a wheelchair through it. I know because I sit or I lean against a telephone pole at a bus stop with no bench or no shelter and feel it when it's raining while holding groceries. Like that vibrational lived perspective that I just believe in so much as a teacher, as something that can move us into action in a different way and in an intentional way.
I think people really appreciate that kind of focused rage. And, sometimes I recoil at it to a certain extent just because of my Jedi teachings, I guess, from listening to Yoda talk about the path to the dark side.
That's amazing.
But it's there and it's real and you have to deal with it in some form or fashion. So being artistic about it and focusing it, I think, is really powerful. And there was an article this last week that, Doug Gordon wrote in Jalopnik about, banned cars, the idea of banned cars and the idea of war on cars. And I thought that it was very nuanced and very good, but it's hard sometimes in short bursts to get the nuance out. And so I think that's a very powerful thing that you're doing. You're going through one kind of intersection at a time and one rage at a time, explaining to people who might not usually be involved in transportation planning to understand what it means for the experts, who are those people who are walking and rolling through this life, what they actually see and hear and feel on a daily basis. And that rage and frustration is palpable and it's real.
It's so real, and constantly experimenting with the kind of calling out and calling in, that we're all a part of it. It's not just the city council member. It's not just the urban planner. It's all of us socially, culturally, behaviorally. And I always am like, I think the thing that just adds fuel to the flame is the class relationship to it, the race relationship. So really being intentional that this isn't just, everybody like loves and chose cars. Like there's a lot baked in. And when we ride transit and we see and witness and move with people outside of these defaults, if car driving is an option and is your default, the layered inequity and injustice around it is loud. It's so harmful. And, and I think the tension of the trees and the sky and the streams, it feels so good. It feels so healthy, the benefits. So the tension of this really important thing that our bodies and our brains and our hearts and our social systems are made to be doing for all these reasons, and yet have been literally blocked by class, race, the consumption connected to the automobile in such a short amount of time. And now we add more isolation, more screens. And then, I mean, to me, it's so connected to not providing kind of this more natural space to help us break up our political divides, our social complexities, our engaging with difference, people who are different than we are. Like we don't have enough of these spaces to help break it up. And we're only adding more isolation. So I think about that from a political social framework. I think about obviously the environmental stewardship and resources and climate and heat. I mean, it touches so many things. So the rage is there. It's loud. It's fiery. I trust it. I know it needs to be. But what's tricky about rage is I think rage and anger, in some ways it destroys. And so it will, like certain days when I'm out really, really fired up about a bus stop or a crossing or an intersection, and I'm really moving through some of the frustration, maybe a car or a bus just blasts by me, sprays me with water in the middle of a video, and so the rage just stacks on rage, and I'm literally devastated. Like I literally shaking after a day of documenting sometimes, because it's so oppressive and heavy and unhealthy. And the grief that I feel for the elders and the children and the families who are out here also, and thinking and really feeling the class and race pieces that don't get brought up enough, and how certain neighborhoods and improvements are invested in related to what you see gets changes in the more heavy touristy places, but what is still yet to be seen as safe and accessible on these arterial roads that are around most of our cities and towns. It's a complicated arrangement to honor the rage, but to not let it destroy you as someone who's trying to tap into it. And I'm figuring that out. I don't have answers fully, but it is a process.
I remember some of the first rage I felt. I ran track and cross country in high school and college, and was running upwards of 90 miles a week sometimes. And one of the reasons why I feel like I connected with your book is because walking and running are not quite the same in terms of a movement, but the exploration of it is somewhat similar. I even lived in Boulder for a summer and really enjoy, Denver, the region, and as a place for walking and hiking and all those things. Walker Ranch Loop up in outside of Boulder is one of my favorite places in the whole world. But where the rage came out, it was that, we'd be running and there was this person who would drive in front of us, and one of my teammates would just slam on the hood because, they'd almost hit us. And then they'd call our coach and we'd get in trouble. And we're like, well, why are we in trouble? They're the one that almost hit us, right? So there's a lot of, it's been happening. This is in 2000, 1999.
Yeah.
It's been happening for, even longer and way longer than that. But I feel like those periods where you feel that rage are real, and it can be hard to focus. It can be hard to focus it sometimes, but
yes,
it is sometimes, like I said, a path to the dark side. And you referenced that as well for the anger. But it's there, and it needs to be something of focus. This is a strange question that comes from my running background. How many shoes did you go through on your trip across the country?
Yeah, it was eight pairs fully destroyed. It was one a month. That was just, the bottoms were practically gone.
I just know that for us, I noticed this for me too, and it was probably a little bit less mileage on my shoes than yours when you're walking, but 500 miles was the limit of shoes.
Yeah.
And then your knees start to hurt and you start to feel the pain of that travel.
Exactly.
What did you do with the shoes when you're done? You just toss them, or did you bury them, or did you
It's a really good question.
A shrine for them?
I totally did that with some of them because they were, yes, you have a relationship with these things. This is part of your house when you're moving in that way. So yeah, I definitely had funny moments of just revering what they brought into my existence for a month. I did have my sister-in-law wanted a pair. The last pair wanted me to send them to him because she made a beautiful like art piece out of the bottoms, cut them up, and did all this cool stuff with them. So yeah, there were definitely fun things to do. And yeah, to your point, like I just knew after that 4 or 5 week time frame, my knees, my back, my hip was like, all right, they're done. So they may not visually be falling off, but you just knew they were done.
Yeah. Something people wouldn't usually learn from a podcast about walking and transportation, right. But The
Yes,
midsoles on those shoes are what goes first before
that's
any of
right.
the outwardly visual things. So if you're finding that you've had a pair of shoes for a really long time walking and you feel like you're just kind of like you're not as bouncy as you used to be, it might be your shoes and it might be time to replace them. And it might change your outlook on life. I really believe that that's a huge thing that people don't think about it very much when they're thinking about walking, right?
Exactly. Oh God, that's a whole nother track. It's just the things you learn as you move through, even just as a pedestrian, if you already move through the world this way, or if you're, wanting to replace your trips or your behaviors, it's like it's the whole world of how you move, whether it's from your socks to your shoes to blister care, foot care, breathing, sock swaps, finding cold, like if you're just like in between some commuting and you see a river there or a creek, like, and you're in some pain. I mean, I'm dipping my feet all the time, even in the city, to get that relief. And, blister care is a huge thing, depending on how many miles you put in and the kinds of shoes that you have. If you have work boots, like how do you have a pair that you can swap into that's in a backpack or in a locker? I mean, there's so many layers to, I even think about the whole other tangent is the five finger, the Vibram, the shoes that, that are really, really low to the ground, close to the ground, and just all the learning there related to strengthening your tendons and thousands of tendons and ligaments that are really made to support the weight of our body, walking toe heel instead of the pounding straight down we do in regular shoes. And so much to learn there.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode about shoes. I've been there and done that many times with all the running that I did. There's also a story in the book about a CDOT employee finally getting what you're talking about after a walk. And I'm wondering how often that happens where you have people who are professionals, but they don't experience the world that they are designing until you bring them there.
Yes, all the time. Jeff, it's literally what moved me, probably primarily to really just dive into this pedestrian dignity project with more attention and experimentation was just how can I be as creative as possible with whatever capacity I have and the tools that I'm experimenting with to invite, inspire, shake up, and again, not just rage, but also from an inspiration space, like a collaboration with neighbors and elders, people in anyone's network who depends on moving as a pedestrian or someone on a wheelchair, or people who take the bus near you, around you, the benefits that we've talked about of moving this way, all those things. And so that, I think the confidence to do that in a way of teaching and education as a formal, like this is a strategy, this is a branch in the big kind of advocacy, education, urban planning, public health, sustainability related to transportation. This is a legitimate way of bringing in embodied education because of all the events that I've hosted, hosted with transportation engineers, planners, city council, different people making big decisions and representing big community decisions on transportation. How many times? It feels like hundreds, where that kind of the specific quote from that CDOT walk that just captured it so clearly for me. The words that she used. For some context, this was an event in Denver, the Colorado Department of Transportation, a lot of staff from our state DOT and from the city of Denver, and we had residents with us. We had other local advocacy groups with us. It was about 25 people. It was a solid group. And the whole purpose of the event was exactly what I kind of riff on with Pedestrian Dignity all the time is an event that's centered on the lived experience, centered on all who have no choice but to be out here, and centering the pedestrian mobility framework on these practical corridors where they're dotted with, really busy practical bus routes, destinations like grocery stores, human resource centers, things like that, schools. And so we took this group out. At the beginning, there was some doubt and there was kind of like, I'm kind of on a time crunch. I gotta we kind of have to do some things coming from the agencies that were kind of checking a box. And I'm like, well, okay, grateful you're here and let's move. Be open, and I kind of plant some good seeds. Halfway through this event, the CDOT staff member comes up to me and says, because we were at the beginning of this walk, we were talking about walking pedestrianism as a choice. They had just rolled out a campaign where make the healthy choice of walking, and I just was like, I'm going to also just share There are millions, y'all. I know we're all learning. So I'm not throwing daggers at you individually, but we need to be with, and I hope we can be with this on this event, that there are millions that can't financially, legally, and physically drive a car. And so we need to be with this. It's not a choice for millions of people. So halfway through this event, the CDOT staff members specifically, but others, and this happens all the time on these different events, but very specifically came up to me and said, we were trying to coordinate how we were going to leave early. I was struggling with what you were framing around walking as a choice and some of the things we've been doing with this campaign. And now I have to apologize to you because I get it. I feel it. I'm experiencing this in a way that I've never experienced it before. And it's horrible witnessing the grandmother, because we all witnessed a grandmother easily. I say grandmother, elder, holding 6 bags of grocery bags in the middle of the median crossing Federal Boulevard, which is one of our big arterial roads in the city. And everybody on our walk witnessed this elder literally shaking, holding these grocery bags, trying to get to the other bus stop on the other side of the road. And she was like, so I apologize for that. And I just told my colleagues, and we kind of all agreed we're going to stay for the whole thing. We canceled our evening meetings. And I just want to share with you that for 20 years, I have had an intellectual relationship to transportation. And so that last sentence, for 20 years, I've had an intellectual relationship to transportation, was the exact kind of quick cut and paste sentence that really informs so much of what happens within pedestrian dignity experimenting.
Yeah, I've been on Colfax.
Oh yeah,
and Federal a number of times, and I understand, and hopefully, some of the work that you're doing can help fix some of those roads. But those are major roads. I mean, there's so many minor ones that are around the country that are like that, and it's super frustrating. One of the stories that I wanted to talk to you about was, I think it was in Spain, and you were with sheep, and it was very powerful with sheep and dogs. I want to kind of understand, how are you able to convene? Is that the right word? Connect, coexist with animals. I love animals, don't get me wrong, but I've never gotten a sheep herding dog to appreciate me in the wild. And I've never tried, but I just found that so powerful, is the connections there with nature and animals.
I'm so grateful you asked that question. I think this is where it's kind of back to some of that tension that we were describing or talking or kind of riffing on, related to the trees and the streams and the gifts and the beauties, these kind of inherent, hence the name of a lot of my artwork, intrinsic. And I truly hope, this is me constantly experimenting. I'm struggling with this stuff all the time. This is not, there's not so much about answers, but it's just really trying to break up the defaults and I always think of the term separation a lot. I think of that word a lot in my work. What is trying to separate me from you? Me and you other human, me and you other animal creature, trees, sky, these very natural elements that share an ecosystem together. And so I think about that tension of what is blocking or keeping us from being in relationship to the natural world, and the lessons and the relational spaces that kind of move in between us, all human, non-human. And because I think there's so much that keeps humans at the center of everything in our thinking and our planning and our doing. And when I think about urban planning or systems around transportation, I think about these habitats, these animal habitats, bird migratory habitats, all these different habitats that are navigating and depending on any number of landscapes and resources that can so easily just get paved over with parking lots and wide, fast roadways without any accountability to the impact on the habitat. And so to your question of the sheep and the sheepdogs, when I'm on these, I'm very intentional about long, unhurried walks. Ever since my walk across the US in 2010, for my own mental health, for my own reconnecting, for my own kind of grounding, it's like I want extended, longer distance, spacious, walks that, and this could be just on a Saturday. This doesn't need to be like weeks. This is just leaving the door at 8 a.m. and not getting back till sunset, and just purely being open and available to these many relationships that exist outside of wherever I'm going to move through. And so the story that you're referencing is from the Camino de Santiago. So I was on this really long walk across Spain, and I had tons of time to move with these different things. And so just the trust and the spaciousness to like, all right, like this is a moment. And I think it connects to presence a lot, like just this invitation of being present, not from a higher than thou place, but just from like, just slowing down to be with what is around me. And I think that presence invitation is a huge one in this time, because we are bombarded at every turn with anything that's trying to get our attention and have our attention and hold our attention. And I think to really be present. So really, honestly, I think it was a moment of being really present to this sheepdog and for those, there's this amazing group of sheep that are moving through the valley underneath this incredible bridge in Puerto Marin, Spain. I happened to be down there drawing. I did a lot of drawing after I finished a day's walk. Hundreds of sheep came through, and they were not being guided by human shepherds. They were being guided by Great Pyrenees, by these huge sheepdogs. And these dogs at the beginning I thought I could kind of go down and walk with the sheep. I wanted to be one with the sheep. And the sheepdogs were like, yeah, no. They're like, no, you can't just do that. I know you're sitting on a wall, like this old ruin wall that was in the valley right next to the river. And you're drawing and you're super like, whatever. We don't care about that. You're a threat to our sheep, and we're going to let you know. And they were intense about it. And one in particular, sheepdog, kind of came right up to my face. And I just think about the layers of how I could have reacted, responded. I could have left that, but to stay present and just like, I kind of use the words in the story related to kind of checking on my intentions. Like, what are my intentions here? Are they meaningful? Are they healthy? And so I think about that same question, no matter where we are, as we move out into our spaces, just if we get moments where we can just pause and be present and have a connection like that, what can that do for our mental health, for our communal health, for our care of animals and habitats and kind of the ecosystems, just to get another path to be a more creative, connected advocate for slowing down and honoring how we're made to move through the world. There's a lot there.
Yes, there is. And I hope people go and read the story in the book, because it's very moving. And not that you didn't do it justice, but there's an intentionality about it in the book that I think is really, really great. There's a story in CNN yesterday on their website about, wildlife corridors, and especially insect corridors in England. And, basically they'd said that 85% of the wildflower patches that were existing are now gone. They're paved over, they've disappeared. And so they're trying to be intentional about bringing some of those back, so they have corridors for bees and pollinators, right? Important to the cycle of life and things like that. And so I think those are important things to think about too. The wildlife corridors, the places that we've, said are not useful to us, which actually are useful. It's funny, there's a story that we always told when I lived in Houston. I lived in a place called Kingwood, and basically the whole framing of the place was the livable forest. And you had to leave a certain amount of trees on your property. Those were the rules. And if you did more, you'd get fined. And it was a beautiful place. There was lots of trails. There were trees everywhere. But if you went over the border to the next town over, basically there was a sign. There would be signs on property, and they'd be, say, for sale. And then it would be improved land. And then basically improvement was that they wiped out all the trees on the land, which doesn't help anybody or anything. And so that stays with me when I think about these environmental issues, especially as it pertains to paving and suburban sprawl and those types of things. What is your improvement? Is it really an improvement? And I think that your discussion lit that memory in me. But I think it's really important to think about those things. I've got 2 more questions for you.
Yes.
How much extra healing do you think walking provided during the pandemic? I know we have slow streets and we have open streets and we have a lot of things that happen. And I think one of the ways that people were able to get out of the house and do something was go for a walk, and maybe more so than they thought before.
Do you have any information about how many people actually got out, or did you feel the difference in the amount of people walking and getting out and participating in the urban environment in that way?
Yeah, good question. There's a lot of ways I could take that. So what I noticed, there were two things happening, I think, as the kind of the primary, just observing that time as someone who's always kind of out moving that way. And I think to what you were framing, I definitely don't have like numbers or anything like that, but just in terms of energetic people literally connecting with me in new ways. I was getting all kinds of messages around like, oh, I finally kind of connect to what you've been ranting about for so long. Or like, gosh, man, like all that like walking and healing stuff, like I'm actually feeling that right now. Like I have time to just be with stuff that's stressful or complex or even just be creative. I think one of the things that has been a real gift using for not everybody, but for some people, when they've just been forced to slow down, shut down certain things, like there's been a lot of creativity that's come from people walking more because of all the specific neuroscience related to creativity and moving the way we're made to, what happens when we create new neural pathways and all. So I was getting a lot of messages and feeling a lot of energy related to a lot of creative stuff was coming out of this time, and connecting it to people moving and slowing down and letting those things kind of do what we're made to be doing. And so just how can we bring this more into our toolkits and practices for how we be more creative around how we connect with each other, how we do our work, how we think about complex political social systems, like as we think about what was happening with and still is happening in this pandemic complexity, like people out moving to move. What are some of those maybe not as conscious byproducts, not making the connection, kind of like with a lot of people who love college, but they're not making the connection that college was also really walkable often and accessible. And like, I love Europe, but not making the connection that certain places, not all of Europe, I'm not on that train. There's a lot of unsafe places in Europe. Let's be real. But people come back and they were walking 8, 10, 12 miles a day, like not making the connection that like moving the way you're made to improves your health, especially when you're feeling safe and comfortable and all those things. The only other thing I'll add is the other thing that was very real with the pandemic, and still with a lot of the things, is just some of the disconnect related to transit and services, and thinking about, again, that centering, just even the acknowledgement within our systems of transportation that there are millions who don't drive a car. And so I think about not only the systems of transportation themselves, but private companies. How many restaurants, how many banks became drive-through only? Like you think about all these different entities and, systems that people depend on for food and everyday life situations that just assumed everyone should or was moving around in single occupant vehicles. And I think that also became really loud. Like, where are we completely shutting down where there was access without centering or being aware that there are people, millions who now have no choice but to access whatever it was? Or how have we not been prepared to support people who are moving this way and aren't driving cars in a whole new way that's safe and healthy? So I think it just, in some ways it lit a fire under what's missing to support an entire population that maybe wants to walk more or that has already been walking and grinding every day to get by.
All right, last one. So at the start of my copy of the book, there's praise from our actually mutual friend, Antonia Melchick, and also Paul Solopik. And I've been following him in National Geographic for years. Obviously, he's been on his journey for years. And I hope that when he comes through the West Coast, I thought about this before, but reading your book made me think of it even more. I probably should I want to hop on wherever I can on the West Coast with him for just at least a little bit.
Yes.
But, he's going from the Rift Valley all the way to Tierra del Fuego on the south of South America, his Out of Eden walk. I'm curious, what your thoughts are on his journey and, walking such long distances in general. Obviously, you did across the country. This one is across the world. What are your thoughts on that journey and where he's going and where he's been? And I know that I imagine you've probably followed it, maybe as much as I have, but I just think it's a fascinating thought about humans and our kind of evolution and mobility, thinking about that on that level, on the trail, on your feet.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, love witnessing different pieces of his journey. And just, whenever I'm catching different creatives who are out there, just people out there who are doing these longer distance, longer form, just walks that unfold with stories and connection and learnings and relationships. And it's never perfect. It's never whatever perfect is, it's not real. Like there's just I always root into like this complexity of like I use the word bypassing a lot in the book. And so like I think just when we think about automobile transportation or flying in some ways, and again, not I fly, I hop in a car all the time. This is not above thou messaging. This is just being with this bypassing of culture, of land, of a story of like the inner journey, the story of us, the big story of us, people who are different than we are, cultures, religions, foods, joy, but also like all the common ground when we can access a way of being that is available to it. And I keep thinking of all these micro moments that Paul and others have, where you see these stories that are just unfolding over days, hours at a time. People who are observing his journey is getting the glimpses; they're getting like the sound bites. But the hours of trust that get built because of approaching a connection or a landscape or with unhurried, I call it humility, just because the walking and unhurried, like walking stance to me is humble by nature in a lot of ways. And so you're approaching a situation or a community or a relationship or a landscape with just your body. And so there's this kind of humble openness that I just love about long distance, because you're allowing yourself to really let it in, and you're allowing other communities and other people to let you into their space because of your body moving through this story in a way that's not bypassing it, not rushing past it, not needing something from it, not transacting with it, not extracting from it, just moving with it. I just find that to be profound as a practice, so I think what Paul is doing and others who do it with such intention and trust, touching and tapping into things that, again, they're not gimmicky. They're not this, hey, it's this new cool thing to do long walks. It's like, this is, y'all, this is what, if we really break down what the human body, mind, heart, and collective is wired to be doing more of as a human way of being, then we would be doing a lot more. I mean, we should be, would be, have been, are, depending on where you are in the world, walking 8 to 10 miles a day through our communities with each other and with all the complex things that go on the inside. And so I think this care of self, care of other, care of earth will show up. And I think that's what you see in Paul's journey. I think that's what you see often in longer distance experiences. And I think that's one thing I'm always experimenting with intrinsic paths. And I'm always going on, like for the book, I'm doing a long walk it releases August 16th. So I'm doing a long walk from Providence, Rhode Island to New York City, starting on August 26th, just because I've wanted to always walk on the East Coast. And if I'm going to write a book on walking, I'm going to be out walking. I just got back from a 6-day experience from Grand Junction to Moab, just to be in creative process with the desert and to kind of get, have the canyons challenge me a little bit. Like, anyway, there's just a constant invitation there, I think, for us to be with people and landscapes and ourselves at that pace for days at a time, if we're able to do it.
Speaking of desert, I've driven Highway 50, by the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. So through Nevada, you drove that?
Yeah, Highway 50 through Nevada. I drove from California to Colorado.
Yeah.
And Highway 50, and I won't tell you how fast I was going on that road or how far I got in a certain amount of time. 300 miles in 3 hours, but
oh my gosh, that's amazing! Wow,
it's a road. I'll say that it's a road.
It is pretty amazing. Yo, such an intent. I just loved it. My favorite part of the journey. Oh my gosh, yes.
Crazy. Well, the book is called Walk, Slow Down, Wake Up, and Connect at 1 to 3 miles per hour, inclusive stories and practices. Jonathan, where can folks find the book when it comes out? I know it's not out yet, but it'll be out in August, right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it releases August 16th. You can find it at really anywhere where books are sold online. North Atlantic Books is the publisher, so going to the publisher site is always wonderful. It's distributed through Penguin Random House, so it'll be, a lot of indie bookstores. Check with your local bookstore, but definitely online through the publisher, North Atlantic Books.
Awesome. And where can folks find you if you want to be found online?
Yeah. So Intrinsic Paths is my website. That's kind of where I host. I'll have book events listed on there, and it's where I have all my pen and ink artwork, which is also dotted throughout the book. So Intrinsic Paths is the home. You can find Intrinsic Paths on Instagram, Facebook, all the social media. And Pedestrian Dignity is primarily on Instagram and TikTok. Y'all, I'm 39 and I'm on TikTok and I'm trying and I love it. It's wild. It's a wild place, but be curious and lean in. Check it out on TikTok. I'm also on Twitter too with Pedestrian Dignity. And then my primary way of supporting my creative work as a walking artist is through Patreon. So you can look up Intrinsic Paths on Patreon if you want to support my work.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for writing the book. I hope folks go out and get it. It's an exploration of life and love and walking. Appreciate it. I hope you
Awesome.
Have a good one. And thanks for joining us.
Cool. Thank you, Jeff.
And thanks for joining us. The Talking Kidways podcast is a project of The Overhead Wire and posted first at Streetsblog USA. Thanks to our wonderful Patreon supporters for sponsoring this show and Mondays at The Overhead Wire. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. You can sign up for our 15-year-old newsletter at theoverheadwire.com. And you can listen to the show on your podcatcher of choice, including Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. And if you can't find it there, you can always find it its original home at usa.streetsblog.org. We'll see you next time at Talking Kidways. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening this far, past the credits. If you're here, I just want to say thank you to all of our generous Patreon supporters, especially those in our $10 Dallas tier and above. I just want to share their names, first names only, of course. But I figured this is long overdue that I let folks know that their support is much appreciative. Obviously, all the tiers are very appreciative, but this group has gone above and beyond over the years, and I really appreciate that. Andrew, Ben, Derek, Gabriel, Glenn, Greg, James, Jeremy, Jim, Joseph, Catherine, Mao, Marcus, Matthew, Mike, Nicholas, Oliver, Steve, Abraham, Abby, Ed, and Matthew. We really appreciate you, and just can't say enough about how much the support from you all and everybody else on Patreon has really helped us out. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everybody, and yeah, so we'll see you next time.